This is October 11th, 2010. My name is Joe Bruckner. I'm a volunteer at the Atlanta History Center. And I'm here with Tony Hilliard, who is also a volunteer at the Atlanta History Center, and Mike Roman, who has kindly agreed to come in and give us his experiences both growing up and in Vietnam when he was in the military as part of the Veterans History Project and the Vietnam Veterans Legacy Project. Mr. Roman, we really appreciate you coming in here, and we're looking forward to hearing you tell us about your experiences.
Appreciate that. Well, my daddy is Mr. Roman. I'm just plain old Mike.
Okay. Mike, we appreciate you coming in.
All right, sir.
Would you give us your full name,
Yes.
your current address, and date of birth, please?
Michael Anthony Peter Roman, born in Detroit, February 18th, 1948. Creek, Georgia. It used to be called Alpharetta, but
Yep.
they decided if they change the name of the city, they can charge us more for living there. So
That's the way it works.
yeah, it is.
Please tell us a little bit about your upbringing.
Kind of a strange upbringing. My mother's was from Mississippi. My dad was from Detroit. They met at the VA hospital in San Antonio, Texas. My dad was shot down after being a B-29 pilot in Japan, and my mother was an Army nurse and nursed him back to health. They got married, and I'm the first of 4 boys.
Wow.
We spent summers in Mississippi with my mama's family, and the rest of the time was in Detroit. My dad was an only child, but we spent much time with my grandmother and a bunch of just friends from where we were living in Dearborn and where my grandmother was living in Detroit. Had just a lot of fun growing up, all kinds of stories.
Well, with your father being in the military, did you always have the idea that you would go into the military?
Well, I don't think I ever left until I came home from Vietnam, to be honest. My dad was a strong disciplinarian. We had closet and dresser drawer inspections on a daily basis. He had to bounce a quarter off our beds to make sure the bed was made right. And I think it taught me a lot. I think I'm rather disciplined in my approach to business and stuff like that. So I learned a lot about that. But I think I spent almost 30 years in the military. But I only was in the Army for 2 years, 8 months, and 6 days.
Well, when did you go into the military?
I enlisted in March of 1968. My dad had moved the family around a bit. We grew up in Detroit, graduated grade school there, played football, baseball, and hockey. I'm an avid hockey fan, and I played in 5 decades. But he moved the family to Louisville, Kentucky after I graduated from grade school. He had been promoted by Ford Motor Company and was doing something at the truck plant. My younger brother, 13 months younger than I, Dan, and I went to high school, parochial boys school, one of the top 10 high schools in the nation, and that prepared me for college. 1966 I graduated, and the day I graduated, Dad walked into the bedroom I was dressing to go to the party and handed me an envelope. And I said, "What's this?" He says, "What's your graduation gift?" And I thought, "Oh my gosh, there's going to be a big check." And I opened it up, and there's a bus ticket. And I said, "What's this about?" And he says, "Oh, that's your bus ticket to South Bend. You're enrolled at Notre Dame. You see Brother Raphael on on Monday, and Tuesday you report to me at the Foundry." I said, "Dad, I'm going to University of Louisville. I'm helping Ira get through college." Ira was our next door neighbor. Ira Glass played for the Pittsburgh Steelers, but had a hard time getting through high school. And the coach at University of Louisville offered me some help in some of my shortcomings, which was with women, and all I had to do was help Ira through college. So that was my plans. And Dad said, "Oh, no, you're going to Notre Dame." And I said, no, Dad, I'm going to University of Louisville. He said, oh, how are you going to pay for that? I had an Air Force scholarship, but it was only a partial scholarship. It didn't include room or expenses, and it just kind of helped out in some of the tuition, not all of it. And I explained to my dad, well, I got this scholarship. And he said, oh yeah, where are you going to live? What are you going to drive? Well, I got my Mustang. Oh, you still owe me for the Mustang. It's not yours yet. So I was kind of between a rock and a hard place, and I figured I'd better get on that bus Monday morning or Sunday morning and show up in South Bend. So I did. Dad had me the interview with Brother Raphael. I told Brother Raphael that I'd had this much of Catholic education. 12 years I thought was sufficient for me to understand what the Catholic faith was all about, and I didn't need more than that. And I'd prefer not going to Notre Dame. And he said, well, just go skate for the hockey coach, and then give me your opinion after you talk to the hockey coach. So my dad had me take my ice skates. I didn't know why, but skated for the hockey coach, and I understand it was a club team, but I didn't understand the whole structure. There was a JV unit and a varsity unit, and if it was a club, I don't know why. Okay, but when I got ready to go out on the ice, the coach said, freshmen don't play varsity. And I thought that was a challenge. So I went out on the ice, skated, scored at will, found the biggest player out there, beat the crap out of him, and I skated off the ice when everybody else was, everybody else had taken the showers, and I was just skating around and just having a good time. Came off the ice, coach grabbed me and says, you can start in junior varsity. Freshmen don't play varsity. What the heck was this about? I didn't know, but in NCAA in 1966, freshmen didn't play varsity sports. He thought I wasn't good enough. So I went back to Brother Raphael and said, well, if I'm not good enough to play varsity sports, I'm not good enough to go to Notre Dame. Brother Raphael says, well, you know where people are if they're not in college? And I said, working in the foundry. And he said, oh, no. He said, they're in Vietnam. And I said, oh. And he says, well, I'll get you in at South Bend, Indiana University State at South Bend. University of Indiana, South Bend campus. He got me enrolled, and for 2 years I screwed around, played bridge in Chicago. I think I had more master points than grade points in 2 years. And I guess it was February, after being kicked out twice of Indiana and getting back in, I made all A's my third semester and quit. Didn't know what I wanted to do. All I knew was college wasn't it, and living at home wasn't it either. And I guess 2 days after I quit college, there was a letter, and it started off, your friends and neighbors have selected you. And I thought, oh, maybe I ought to take this serious, and went in to look at a couple programs. And the Army, the Navy, the Marines, and Air Force all wanted different lengths of service for the same exact education. So I went into the Army because it only required 3 years, and I trained for a year in electronics and became a crypto maintenance man, a 31S30. Went to Vietnam and came back in November, just maybe a week before Thanksgiving in 1970. Did two tours in Vietnam.
How'd your family feel and your friends when you went into the service with Vietnam heating up, so to speak? Well,
I had a bunch of different type of friends. The friends from the college, we had sit-ins and stuff like that. And the friends when I worked in a foundry, and I worked in a foundry for the 2 years I lived in a home. Everybody expected you to go to Vietnam from the foundry. And everybody expects you to bring your draft card at the college, so
yeah.
I was kind of torn. I really didn't know what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
Dad's education and discipline, there was a place for that. And I what I couldn't figure out is why it hadn't sunk in with me if it was so damn good. But I thought, well, maybe if I go through the Army and learn something about the rest of the world, it'd make some sense.
Well, tell us where you went to, where your basic training was, some of your training experiences.
Oh, that was really cool. I went to Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri, and my drill instructor was Sergeant Leo Elliott. And kind of a little bit background. I have a brother who's 13 months younger than I am, and when he found out I was joining the Army, about 3 days before I left for the Army, he ran away from home. And stayed gone. I had no idea where he was, but make a long story short, he told me years later that he ran away from home to say he left home first.
Really? How about that?
And he dodged the draft for a number of years. I had just signed the papers to extend my tour in Vietnam when he wrote me and said, "Oh, Mike, don't," he said, "don't sign up for an additional tour in Vietnam like I asked you to." He said, "I've seen the errors on my way." He had been drafted, got in, he was in the Army, went through basic training, and coming out of basic training, he saw the light. He went to OCS, went airborne, and went to Ranger School. And he was writing me from Ranger School saying, "If you extend in Vietnam, it'll be hard for me to go to Vietnam. So don't extend." But I had already signed the papers, and when he first was writing me, I was yanking his chain saying, "Oh, geez, Dan, you know, if I stay this time in Vietnam, you're going to owe me big time."
Well, now, when you were at Leonard Wood, were you going through the basic training there?
Just plain old basic training. I was kind of strange, but I became a squad leader.
Right.
And Sergeant Leo Elliott was a very good friend of mine. He was a terrible disciplinarian. And I'm just, oh man, he just rode my ass for coming out of the barracks one day without my cover. Mm-hmm. And I had to pull extra duty that night. I don't think I slept that night at all. Yeah. But just for coming out without a hat. Yeah. And then he put me in charge of the squad, and my bay, we were strapped. I mean, I had a good bunch of guys, and most of them were from Chicago area. I don't think English was a first language for any of them, except Rusty. And we just clicked as a squad. We were just tight. When it was time for us to do the room, whoever time it was to do the buffing, had the buffer in his hand and was buffing the floor. And I kind of took care of them, looked after them, made sure that when we went through training, everybody was getting what they needed to get, and was keeping up with everything. And there was a bunch of times when I would pull one of them along with me. Yeah. And Elliott came to me, and first time was I guess about halfway through basic, and just read me the riot act. He said, "Who the hell you think you are not telling me your brother ran away from home?" And I said, "I don't know why it's any of your business." And he said, excuse me, he says, "I'm your mother and I'm your father." He said, "I'm your best friend, I'm your worst enemy. You don't hide anything from me." He says, "I'm here to help you. I'm here to make you a man, and you share your problems." And he said, "I ought to beat you to a pulp right here." I said, "Well, Sergeant Allen, if you want to fight, you got one. But there's no need for a fight because it really wasn't any of your business, and I didn't think it was, but I understand different now. If you want to go, let's go." Well, we didn't. And I guess that Elliott took a special interest in me for that. And a quick little story, and it kind of is important because there's some references to it later. But one of the guys that I was in competition with to make the number one out of basic was a guy who was the squad leader in the squad to my right, and the guy who was the squad leader, the guy on my left. And a quick little story, the guy on the right was not always paying attention. The buffer was in front of his room, and nobody had gotten it. Our time came up for the buffer. It was Rusty Wilson's turn to do the floor. Rusty went out, got the buffer, and started buffing the floor. And this was, we were in competition this day to get a weekend off. And make a real long story short, Rusty was buffing the floor, the buffer shut off, and the guy in the squad over, and I can't remember his name right now, but it's in the story here, grabbed the buffer from Rusty. Well, Rusty was in his stocking feet, and the guy was in his stocking feet. I still had my boots on, and I was in the room. This is the room here, like this. You walk in this way. I was in the far bunk on the left. So I jumped on from bed to bed because I didn't want to screw up the floor, and jumped just right in front of the guy, pushed him out the door, and went out the door with him. And somebody went in and plugged the buffer in, and Rusty was finishing up the floor. And this guy who said, "It's our time for the buffer." I said, "Your time for the buffer has passed." And as Rusty was coming out the room, the guy from the next room says, "My turn for the buffer." Well, Rusty handed him the buffer, and the guy on my right grabbed the buffer, and the two of them were going to face off, and I was kind of between them. So the guy, both of those were in stocking feet. When the guy on my right grabbed the buffer, the guy kind of lost his footing and fell, got up and took a swing at the guy. I saw the swing coming, ducked. He hit that guy, pushed him and knocked him against the wall, and he was coming after me. I pushed him into the wall. He hit his head, knocked himself out, and the other guy had been knocked out by the blow from the other guy, and the whole floor in the barracks just emptied out in the corridor. Well, Elliot was sergeant of the guard at that time. He comes running up the stairs and looking at what's going on, and he clears the way and comes over to me and sees two guys laying against the wall, knocked out. And Elliot looks at me and says, "Roman, what happened?" And Rusty says, "Oh, Sarge, you should have seen it. This guy was trying to get the buffer from me. Roman pushed him out of the way. He swung at Roman. Roman knocked him out. The other guy grabbed the buffer to swing at Roman. Roman knocked him out. He said he knocked them both out." So I did nothing. And Rusty had convinced everybody that I was a hero because it was our time for the buffer. And Elliot looked at the two guys and said, "Oh, okay," and he turned on and walked away.
You're the hero.
I'm the hero.
Well, after you left Leonard Wood, where did you go between then and going to Vietnam?
Went to Fort Monmouth for a year of training and met another guy. And a little story here. When you got to Fort Monmouth, you did a week of what they call 0 week, and that's where you polished trash cans and painted rocks and moved rocks from one side of the road to the other and pulled KP and all that kind of stuff. And I had learned a little story about that in 0 week at Fort Leonard Wood, and Sergeant there had put everybody in line, was starting asking them questions, and he was looking for a friend or somebody who was from his hometown and was going to put that guy in charge of the detail. So when we had our assembly, the sergeant was from South Bend. His name was Barnes. Was telling us what we were going to be doing, and another 0 week, and it was going to be hell and all this kind of stuff. And he said, "I want to see all the boys from Indiana after this." And we were living in South Bend at the time, so I stuck around. But instead of getting on one end of the line or one end of the other end of the line, I decided I'd get in the middle and kind of listen to the stories and see if I could build my case for not having to pull KP or anything that week. And by the time Barnes got to me, I figured out he was from South Bend. He had a younger brother that was about my age. His younger brother had gone to St. Joe's in South Bend, where my little brother had gone. And he had a friend who had a '57 Chevy, and he and his buddy used to go out and take the '57 Chevy out. and his little brother was a bit of a pain in the ass. So when Barnes got to me, he says, "Where are you from, Roman?" I said, "South Bend." He said, "Where'd you go to school?" I said, "St. Joe's, South Bend, St. Joe." And he says, "Where'd you work?" I said, "At the foundry." And he had worked at the foundry too, I had learned. And then he knew the guy named Shorty Peters. But Shorty Peters is this 6-foot tall guy whose real name was John Petrauskas. His last name was Petrauskas. And he shortened his name to Peters. That's how he got the name Shorty. So he asked me about, he says, "Oh, you worked at the South Bend. Did you know a guy named Peters?" And he says, "Yeah." "Sorry," he said, "take that Chevrolet of yours and shove it up your butt." I said, "Yeah, I had a '65 Mustang." And Peters told me the same thing about my Mustang. He was a Studebaker man, and at the foundry we're working at was the old Studebaker foundry. And he didn't like anybody who didn't drive Studebakers. So Barnes looked at me and kind of laughed and went through the rest of the line, and then he said, dismissed us. And he said, "I want to see Roman after the assembly." So everybody left, and he came up to me and he said, "My office." So we walked in his office, and I sat down, and he says, "God damn it, Roman," he says, "you're a liar." He says, "But I like the way you think. You're quick on your feet, and that's the kind of guy I need." He says, "All you have to do for this week is make sure the guys are on the truck." He said, "You got the rest of the day off." So my 0 week at Fort Monmouth was getting the guys up at 4:30, putting them on the truck, and I was off for the rest of the day.
When did you find out you were going to Vietnam?
Another story that involves Sergeant Barnes. I did my training at Fort Monmouth, and I had a great time. I was strapped because I was really trying to go to OCS, filled out all the paperwork, and my company, I was in Company A when we started, filled out the paperwork, and First Sergeant calls me into his office and said, "Captain, I'll see you in about 2 weeks. We like your paperwork." 2 weeks later, I get a call from the captain. The captain says, "Roman," he said, "you're a great soldier. I like the way you think you're quick on your feet. You're a good team player. Unfortunately, I can't write you up for going to OCS because you're no longer in my company, and for me to write you up and recommend you for OCS to have to be in my company. But I know the new company commander of the company you're going to. He's an outstanding soldier. You just work as hard for him as you work for me, and I'm sure he'll write you a letter of recommendation to go to OCS. Well, a couple of weeks later, or a couple of months later, I got the same from that company commander. And I got put in a night company. I was going to school during the day. So we lost 16 hours of weekend activities because we couldn't be dismissed until the company was dismissed. But we had to be back in class, 16 hours before the rest of the company returned. So I kind of got screwed up the last couple of weeks. And I had also played football, 6-man tackle. And we beat this company commander's team, who was the perennial post champ. And I intercepted 6 passes and ran 5 of them back for touchdowns. And we just beat the snot out of that company. And how I ever wound up in Major Cruz's company, I don't know. But I had done the paperwork for OCS, had submitted it to First Sergeant, had that meeting with the First Sergeant. He told Major Cruz would look at the paperwork and make his recommendation in a couple of weeks. And Barnes, who was the field first, had me in his office. Make a real long story short, he said, "Roman," he says, "here's your orders from Vietnam." And this was about 3 months before I was finished with school.
And what year was this?
This was 1968,
Okay.
just before Thanksgiving.
Okay.
Or right around, I guess it was right around Christmas or Thanksgiving. And Barnes says, "You want to see who else is going with you?" And I said, "Yeah." He showed me the names of about 7 or 8 guys. And make a real long story short, the 7 of us, 7 or 8, and I can't remember, I got to go look through the story, but we all had the same story. We'd all applied for OCS. We'd moved from company to company to company. We were all in major cruises. We were all in the day school and in a night company. So we decided to have a Christmas party when we got ready to go home for Christmas leave, and threw $5 in a pot, and the pot, whoever brought back the cheapest wine won the pot. Well, there was another guy named Schroeder and myself decided, if we're going to drink something decent. And so I got some nice German wine, and he had a nice French wine. The rest of the guys were bringing back, I think one guy had a receipt for 50 cents for his gallon of wine. And we had a Christmas party, and the one stipulation was to win the pot, you had to drink your wine.
So you got less sick than the guy with the 50 cent
Well,
wine?
yeah, but Schroeder, who had the wine, and told us about, we were sitting about how to plot. We were plotting about what the hell are we going to do. We're going to Vietnam. Come back from Vietnam, we'll have another year to serve. Well, if you extend your tour in Vietnam and you spend an extra 6 months, if you come home with less than 6 months to serve, you get an early out. So we did some calculation and figured out that if we failed the teletype class, we could get sent back through the 2-week teletype class and come out of Vietnam with less than 6 months to serve. So we all went to Vietnam, and all but Jack Carney came back.
Your father, you said, was a World War II veteran. How did he feel about you going to Vietnam?
He didn't say anything. He really didn't say anything. He was still PO'd at me, and I don't think he ever forgave me. My dad died about 3 years ago, and I don't think he ever forgave me for not going to Notre Dame.
Talk about your Vietnam experience. You trip over, once you got there, what you did, just...
There's something strange about me in that, although I sometimes am sarcastic and nasty, I try to find the bright things. My first duty station was in Kanto, and there was a real war going on. We served guard duty every third night.
Now, what unit were you in?
I was with the 52nd Signal Battalion, Company A.
Okay, go ahead.
And we were in charge of communication for 4th Corps. And sometimes we had to answer the phone, and we went up wherever the phone call took us. But one of the stories, and so where I was going with it is I always looked for the fun I could have. And got tight with a bunch of people, and since I really haven't talked to any of them, I really can't use their names.
Sure.
But there was an Italian guy who has found me, and my best friend who has found me. We're still in communication.
Okay.
But we had some just wonderful times. And some of the guys from Fort Monmouth, when I did the training, went with me to Kanto. And we were responsible for fixing electronics, and when the phone call came, we went. But when I was in Kanto, my company commander, and I'll call him Captain Benedict, was my first CO, had me come in, and he spent 2.5 hours just talking to me. Found out who I was, what my strengths were, what my weaknesses were, what I liked to do, what I didn't like to do, and just kind of took an interest in us. Every one of us spent that kind of time with us. And when he and I were talking, he found out I was a bridge player, and I had more master points at Indiana more master points from playing bridge in Chicago than master points at Indiana. And he was looking for a 4th that night. He was playing with the battalion commander, 52nd, who liked to come in and drink. And his fourth, whoever that was, and he picked different people, or his buddy, and whoever that was, but they were different people, and it was me, the only enlisted man. Captain, a full bird colonel, and some lieutenant colonel. So we played bridge and talked to Captain Benedict about halfway through and said, you know, I think, and I'll call the full bird Colonel Humphrey. I said, I think Colonel Humphreys is going to buy me a stereo equipment. He's going to buy me a camera. He's going to buy me a film camera. And he's going to give me a whole bunch of money for my time here. He said, what are you talking about? He says, I said, we can beat him at bridge. We did. And I had a top of the line stereo equipment, video equipment. I had a film projector. I had a slide projector. That man, I think we probably took him for close to $2,000 just playing bridge over about a 4-month period when Captain Benedict was there. And it earned me a bunch of points, you know, with some of the guys, and just had a good time, just looking for things like that. Now there was a war on, and we had to pull guard duty every third night. And there was more than one time we fired our weapons. I was not a combat soldier.
So you had contact with the enemy?
On more than one occasion. And one of the times that when I took a phone call, I got to go out to the field. And it was kind of a strange phone call. A phone call came and I answered. I said, this is B.O., our call names. And he said, B.O., pack for about a week. There'll be a chopper to meet you at the airport there in Kanto. They'll fly to Saigon and then they'll fly you out of there. Where am I going? Well, just told you. Oh, well, yeah, but you didn't tell me where I'm going to wind up. Well, you'll know when you're there. I was attached to a squad of Army Rangers who was working with the 9th Armored Infantry Division. And my memory is it was about 9 weeks that I got to serve in the field. And when I got there, the lieutenant, the young guy, he looked younger than me. He says, Roman, he says, there's one of 3 ways you're going home. And this is where this is going to be a little bit graphic. He said, you're going home because you screwed up and you're in a body bag and we didn't like it because we didn't like you. Or you're going up because we liked you but we couldn't protect you and so you're going home in a body bag. Or you're going to walk out of here. Choice is yours. So I walked out of there.
Where were you?
I have no idea. But I mean, I can say that when we flew to Saigon, we took a Jolly Green Giant and we flew for about an hour and a half north and west of Saigon. I don't think we were in Vietnam.
Oh, okay.
And what we were doing was the only thing I could get from the lieutenant that I was with. We were mapping.
Mapping.
Yeah, that's all I really know. But that was we finished in August of '69, and I think the carpet bombing of Cambodia and Laos started right around that time.
Okay.
And I don't think the U.S. found about it till December.
Yeah. Okay.
But I think we were finding where the bombing ought to be.
I got you. Okay.
We were never in one place for more than 4 or 5 hours, my memory.
Yeah.
And we were just mobile. We just, wherever the 9th Armored Infantry was, we were their support.
Okay.
And the squad of Rangers were just there as advisors or to keep my ass from getting shot.
Yeah.
There was one night that Smitty, who was with me from Kanto, and I were on an M60 in a little trench with a couple of M79s and a couple of M16s and a couple other people. And I'll tell you what, I was never more scared by entire life.
Well, yeah.
But and I don't know how those guys did that for a living. And I only had to do it for 9 weeks.
What was your emotion when you finally lifted out of there?
I think I peed myself. I'm not sure. But it was a 3-day ride back to Kanto, from wherever we landed. And I was on M60 for those 3 days with my 3 pieces of crypto gear.
Oh.
Now, why they couldn't fly me back with crypto gear?
Just briefly describe what that crypto gear did.
It was enciphering devices. And these were particularly for radio teletypes, or for teletypes.
Yeah.
There were also voice encryption, field phones and Prig 25, I think it was, and there were some landline communications too. We didn't have any landlines out in the field, but we did have Prig 25s and how they moved that frickin' trailer around. I didn't always see it. I saw it occasionally. And I had to maintain the crypto gear and the teletypes for that stuff. And I fixed a bunch of Prig 25s that kind of got shut up too.
Okay, where did you go after you got back to your...
Well, let me finish telling the story. The 3-day truck ride, we came into a little town called Sadek. And I visited the girl who was working that night with Smitty, who was also on the truck with me going back to Saigon. And coming over this little bridge outside of Sadek, I heard a voice. And the voice said, "Put your head down." Of course my head goes up. I said, "Who said that?" I said, "Said what?" And the voice said, "Put your head down." So I said, "Put your head down." We all put our heads down. The truck went up. We came out the back. The truck flipped over and killed the driver. And I landed on my neck and shoulders. And I don't know where everybody else went, but my upper body twisted, knocked the breath out of me. And there was a brief little firefight right over where we were. And just as quick as it started, it was done. I couldn't get up because the wind knocked out of me, and I was on the back twisted, and I couldn't feel my legs for a while. After a couple hours, I could sit up, and I don't know why, but I got put on a truck, and we got trucked back to Kanto. And I was spent the night in the infirmary. I think it was the 9th Arvin. No, it was the it was an army hospital in Kanto. Had a hernia from the incident that I got fixed in Saigon at after my got sent to Cam Ranh Bay. But Smitty made it through that. We got back to Kanto. And shortly after that, I got sent to Cam Ranh Bay.
And what was your responsibility at Cam Ranh Bay?
Cam Ranh Bay fixed the devices that got implanted in the field to detect troop and vehicle movements. And we had some things that they could dangle from the canopy and listen to some conversations on the trails and stuff like that.
This was on the perimeter outside of Cam Ranh Bay?
No, we were in. No, our equipment went everywhere. It was all over.
Oh, okay.
It was in 1st Corps, 2 Corps, 3 Corps, and 4 Corps.
So you were responsible for
maintaining, for building. I guess building that equipment. And we got to go once in a while. We got to go out in the field and look at where the body parts were and in relation to our equipment.
Yeah.
And we made them, reports up on it and send it back so there'd be more body parts and better distribution.
Yes, I understand.
But that was a different story. In Cam Ranh Bay, there was a war going on. We got sent on guard duty with empty M14s. And I'm not sure who the enemy was in Cam Ranh Bay.
You said with empty M14?
Yes, sir. And make a, you know, people don't believe that. But I'm here to tell you the damn truth. And my last night in Vietnam, I was with a squad of combat soldiers, or a group of combat soldiers. And I told them about that. Yeah, you're a liar. Oh, really? Let's take a walk. So we walked out on the perimeter to where the guys were with empty M14s. And they came back and I said, how are we going to sleep? You guys ever get hit? Oh, yeah, we get hit. All the time we get hit. And right when I was telling the story, we saw a group go by. And he got ready to toss a bag at us and decided not to. Went to the next barracks that was empty and tossed a bag into the barracks, and the barracks went up. And I don't know what overtook me, but I caught up with that, and I killed him. I did the, you know, the rear strangle takedown hold. The guy was dead before he hit the ground. And these combat soldiers were coming after me. You idiot! What are you running after him for? I didn't know. I didn't know. But that night, I was not supposed to be in Vietnam. I was supposed to leave that morning. And I can tell you a couple stories about the first sergeant at that company. I had bested him on a number of things. And one of the things that I did in my Cam Ranh Bay days, 8 months, was when there was an OD, whatever company it was from, I put his name on a list with other people. Put his name, rank, and serial number. Where he was from on every first sergeant's door. I said, here's another one for your gallery. There was no esprit de corps in Cam Ranh Bay. Can you imagine going out on a perimeter where enemy soldiers come in and having an empty weapon? The only reason I think they had M14s was because when you clicked on an empty chamber, it made a big, louder noise when it clicked on an empty round on an M14 than it did when you clicked on an empty round in a 16.
Explain why they were sent out with empty weapons.
Cam Ranh Bay had a drug problem. I said the names on the list were people who had OD'd.
Right.
Officers really didn't care.
Okay.
Officers didn't care. I saw my company commander once when I got there, and once at some other time when he pinned a flag on our banner for some kills we had in the Oshawa Valley. The only time I saw him. First sergeant was a dick. When he came, Johnson, I got transferred up from Kanto with a black guy named Tommy Johnson. When we walked in, we spent 2 days in the receiving area there in Cam Ranh Bay, excuse me. And I picked up the phone after the second day, called the company that I was supposed to be going to, and I said, this is Colonel Humphreys. You have 2 men here. I want these men out of here. They've been billeted at my expense for 2 days. They're not spending another damn day here. Give me your captain. And I found out who the CO was. And I said, Captain, this is Colonel Humphreys. I want these 2 men out of here, and I want them out of here the next 2 hours, or I'm coming down on your ass. Well, we were out of there in 2 hours. And we got to company headquarters, who walked in, and right behind us was the first sergeant, drunk on his ass. This is like 9 o'clock in the morning. And he looked at us and said, who the hell are you two? I said, I'm Spec 5 Micron. This is Private Johnson. We're up here from Kanto. We're your 2 new replacements. Well, get the fuck out of my office. I'll send for you when I'm ready. Sure. Where do you want us to go? He'll tell you where to go. So Johnson and I went to a billet, and we were the only ones in this 5 or 9-man Quonset hut, or 10-man, whatever that, it was a small Quonset hut. We were the only people in there. And we stayed there for about 6 weeks.
Doing what?
We went to Tiger Lake every day. And the company clerk was a guy named Toby McGuire, a really nice guy. And he told us, well, here, don't worry about it. First sergeant just that way. He says, I've got you on the company payroll, so you'll be paid. And when the first sergeant's ready for you, he'll send for you. So I bought him a bottle of Chivas. I had a ration card. I could buy hard liquor. The guys in Kanto could buy hard liquor. Guys in Cam Ranh Bay could not buy hard liquor. You had to be E6 to buy hard liquor. You get sick on 3-2 beer before you get drunk. So what are guys going to do?
Yeah.
And your mama son, for $5 you could buy a month's supply of heroin. So anyway, make a long story short, I used to pick on the first sergeant. He was a drunk. I had no respect for him. I had no respect for the company commander. I had no respect for my XO. And there was nothing in Cam Ranh Bay. You worked 8.5 hours a day, 5 days a week. You were free the rest of the time. What are you going to do? You can't go into town telling us off limits. What are you going to do? Well, I decided to steal a $1.50 and ride around to see what I could find. And I came on an airfield that had been abandoned. It was overgrown with weeds, but it had PSP, perforated steel plating.
Yeah.
So I went back to the company with the truck, dropped off the keys, and I told McGuire, we're going to have a volleyball league. Went to the other companies around the area and asked them, the company clerks, you guys want to have a volleyball league? Every one of them said yes. So Colonel Humphreys made another phone call to all the companies saying, hey, this is Colonel Humphreys. I want a truck, I want a $1.50, and I want 10 men out at this place at this time of day on this day. We loaded PSP up, went back and built volleyball courts. And we played volleyball. We got the nets from the, not Red Cross, but
Special Services.
yeah. And we played volleyball. I was an E5.
Wow.
Why did I have to do that?
Yeah.
And you want to know why we carried empty weapons?
Yeah.
Because of shit like that.
Yeah.
Officers were getting shot, officers were getting frags, non-coms were getting shot, non-coms were getting fragged. That's why.
Yeah.
They weren't leaders.
Wow. And this, at least based on your experience, was somewhat unique to Cam Ranh Bay versus where you had been before?
Kanto, no, night and day difference.
Yeah.
Like I said, Camp Benedict took, when he first met me, 2.5 hours, just getting to know who I was.
Yeah.
First sergeant didn't even spend 2 minutes with us before he kicked us out of his office.
Yeah. Huh.
And he was drunk on his ass.
Sure.
I never talked to the company commander. And, to get back at us after I'd been there for 6 weeks, I got sent over to POR training. POR, Preparatory Overseas Replacement Training, right? And I had to learn about the flora, the fauna, the women, and the diseases in Vietnam. And a little story there. The guy that had the fight with me in the hallway at Fort Leonard Wood, he was the guy giving the lectures. And we had to zero our M14s, and Johnson was on my right. And I said, Johnson, we're going to have some fun. I said, this guy was in basic training with me. He didn't recognize me. And I said, I'm going to show him what a sharpshooter I am. So we get three rounds. You take the first round, you stand by your target. The sergeant says, all right, up 2 over 1 or whatever. So you adjust your windage on your weapon. You go back, you shoot another round. He confirms, and you go back for one more round for confirmation. So I, ready, aim, fire, and I shot way over the target. walked over and he was walking looking at targets. I punched a little hole in my target. And I said, Johnson, just go with me. And he came over to me and I was dead center. The sergeant looked at it and said, wow, lucky shot. I said, nah, nothing to do with it. So he looked over at Johnson, told him what he had changed his windage or whatever. And we went back and I said, Johnson, I said, we're going to have a great time. So I shot over the second time, I shot way over the target again. Went out and took out a penknife and just made a little tick in the piece of paper we were shooting at. And Johnny was shaking his head, looking at me, trying to figure out what the hell's going on. The guy comes over and says, aha, see, I told you, you missed. No, look, right here, there's a little nick. I'm going to watch you this time. So we were walking back and I said, Johnson, your weapon's going to jam. And he says, ready, aim, fire. And Johnson stands up and says, my weapon's jammed. He looks over the map, boom, shot way over the target. And he looks over at me, he said, did you hit it? I said, same place. And Johnson said, oh yeah, it's okay, it's clear now. He shot his. Whipped over went down to the range, stood right next to mine. Sergeant looked at it and said, I've never seen shooting like that before. I said, I tell you what, Sergeant, this is the weapon I had in basic training. As I know this weapon inside out. And he still didn't catch on. I mean, this is the guy that I had that fight with, and he didn't know who the hell I was. He didn't remember anything.
What unit were you in while you were in Cam Ranh Bay?
It was either 129th or 139th or 38th Signal Company.
Okay. And was that your last assignment
That was
in
my
Vietnam?
last assignment. And you know, because the tour was so negative, I honest to God, the only person's name I remember was Johnson. I don't remember anybody's name. Nobody.
So how long were you in Vietnam total?
18 months, a little over, and I don't remember the date and the number of days. I'm sure I could calculate it, but I was in the Army 2 years, 8 months, and 6 days.
And just, briefly, what was your most memorable experience or your most significant memory from your tour there?
Looking out the window of the plane as we left.
That's a good answer.
No, I had good times in Cam Ranh Bay. Excuse me, Kanto, not Cam Ranh Bay. I have nightmares, and I still have nightmares about being on guard duty with an empty M14. I served one guard duty with an empty M14.
Jeez.
Went back to McGuire and I said, McGuire, I had a top secret with crypto access clearance because I worked that Saigon circuit for McPhee.
Yeah.
So I went to McGuire and I said, look it up. I don't have to pull guard duty again. I don't have to pull driving, chauffeuring, sergeant of the guard, nothing. And McGuire found a way for me to not have to pull any of those nothing. First sergeant was on my ass for the rest of that tour.
Did you have an assignment once you returned to the United States, or were you
I just let go.
Okay.
They greeted us there. It was about 52. We were in khakis and short sleeves and walked around in 52-degree weather with an overcast from building to building.
And once you returned to the U.S., what kind of reception did you get from family, friends, others?
Walking off the plane, we got belted with bottles. I got spit on in the terminal as we were walking to the buses or whatever. And when I got out of the Army, flew out of Fort Lewis, Washington, walked into a bar in my uniform, 3 stripes on my arm from the 2 tours in Vietnam. Walked into the bar, sat down, waited for somebody to buy me a drink. Bartender comes over and says, "You need to get in the restroom, take that uniform off." I stood up, grabbed him by the collar, was pulling him across the bar, gonna beat the shit out of him, when a policeman walked in and says, "You may want to think about putting him down." I said, "Did you bring somebody with you?" He says, "Yeah, there's 3 of us." So I pushed the bartender back over. The guy told me what it was like. Didn't arrest me or nothing.
Good. Good for
But,
you.
And that's, for the next 2 years, that's how I got greeted. My first job when I came home was roofing a red roof in Valdosta, Georgia, for 50 cents an hour under minimum wage. That way I didn't have to claim it on my unemployment.
And what year was this when you got back?
That was 1970. I got home just before Thanksgiving, 1970.
Okay.
And couldn't find a decent job. And I'm very bitter about that.
Yeah.
I like I said, I still have nightmares about pulling guard duty. I don't know what the Army was thinking.
Yeah.
But, you know, my hat's off to that first lieutenant who watched my ass for the 9 weeks that I remember being on.
Have you had the opportunity to get back together with any of your former comrades? Or?
I have Amoroso, one of the guys, and I have talked on the phone. We've talked about getting together. We have never gotten together. And John McLean, who was my best friend in Kanto, and I have had a visit together. We stayed. I was in his wedding after I came home from my second tour, and he postponed the wedding until I came home. Didn't make any points with his wife.
Yeah, I guess not.
But
Tell us what you're doing now.
I'm a management consultant. I work with companies, helping them find or fix their business management system. It's called ERP.
Yeah.
It's a lot like fighting a war.
Yeah.
But the only enemies are ourselves. And I really think because of what I learned in that second tour in Cam Ranh Bay, I have a good way of helping people see the problems they have with themselves and their business, and I can help them fix it pretty quickly.
Well, you've had some amazing experiences, and
I'm blessed. I really am. That voice in the truck was my grandmother.
well, I did want to ask you that. Did you ever determine whether this was a voice from the truck or somewhere else?
It was my grandmother, you know, and my psychologist buddy, who works with the Army. I said, "No, it was your drill instructor." I said, "No, Sergeant Elliott's voice was no, that was my grandma."
Yeah.
And it was kind of strange. My grandmother died just before we left Detroit. She had breast cancer, had a double mastectomy, and when Dad announced to the family that we were moving to Louisville, Grandma said, "No, she's not going." And I says, "Ma, you don't have any choice. You're going with us." She died, had a heart attack, but had skin cancer. And the skin cancer came up in like a week and a half. She had boils, she had blisters, and we didn't know. We went over to bring her to the house because my dad was coming home from England. He had been sent to England with Ford Motor Company to solve some problems. And we were supposed to be packing and all this kind of stuff, and we called Grandma up, and Grandma didn't want to come over to the house, and so Mom and I and Dan, Mom and I went to go get my grandmother. And the house was a mess. Dishes, and that was not my grandmother. My grandmother was a tidy, neat person. Well, she was just a wreck. Brought her to the house, put her on the couch in the living room, and we were watching cartoons, and I was laying sitting back on the floor with my back on the couch. All of a sudden, you know, after my grandmother had been asleep for about an hour, she just stood up, grabbed me, and said, "Mikey, you know, I'm always going to be with you." Yeah, Grandma, yeah. "No, Mikey, I'll always be with you.
Wow.
So the truck, another good story. Met my wife, I've been married for 38 years. Or 36, 30, who, no. Doesn't matter
Yeah,
how
when you
long
got
ago.
those numbers. Yeah.
And I was at Valdosta State College when I came home. I went to school on GI Bill. And went to pick up this young lady who I'd been trying to date. She finally agreed. As we're walking to my 62 VW, the horn beeped twice. I still opened my wife's car door, so I opened the car door, let her in, and closed the door, walked around the car, and the horn beeped twice. I got in, my wife, Susan, said, "You need to get that horn fixed." I said, "There's nothing wrong with my horn." So we were driving over to my house for dinner, and I said, "Hey, I'm sorry, I forgot, I got to get some dinner rolls. Do you mind stopping at the store?" "Oh, no. I need to get some gum, so I'll get it for you." "No, I'll go in with you." So we drove to a 7-Eleven on the way to the house, opened her car door, closed the car door. As we're walking into 7-Eleven, the horn beeped twice. She says, "You need to fix that horn." I said, "There's nothing wrong with my horn." We got what we needed, walked back in the car, beeped twice. Got in the car, drove to the house, got out of the car, the horn beeped twice. Taking her, after we got through with dinner, I was going to drive her back to the dorm. As we were walking to the car, the horn beeped twice. Drove to the dorm, let her out of the car, got out to open her door, closed the car, the horn beeped twice. Got back in the car, drove home, had a dream that night. Grandma said, "That's the one." And the kids don't believe the horn honked. Nobody believes the horn honked, but Susan and I know the horn honked.
So she was still with you.
She was still with me. She made it through Vietnam too.
Yeah, got you through. Was there anything else you'd like to tell us? We really appreciate you coming in here.
I sound
doing
kind
this.
of negative about the Army, but that's because the Army was kind of negative with me. And the U.S. was negative to all of its sons and daughters who came back from Vietnam. I don't think any of us had a positive experience after we first came home. It doesn't change the way I see the world. I'm just a little more skeptical, I guess, than most people.
Yeah.
But I don't miss an opportunity to hug or shake the hand of another GI. And thank them for what they're doing.
Well, I want to thank you for what you did for the country, and
It's my honor.
and thank you for sharing your stories. It's so important that we all hear these stories, and that people that come after us hear them. And I just can't tell you how much it means to all of us for you to come in here and share your stories.
I enjoyed it. Sorry I cried.
No, that's
You're
the
not alone.
emotions are part of what make the stories what they are.
Thank you. You guys, I appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you.